I'm David Lombardo, and this is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room, and we're joined in the studio by Assemblymember Jessica González-Rojas, a Queens Democrat who's here to discuss legislation that would expand the rights of stalking victims in New York and address what proponents describe as a loophole in state law. Welcome back to the show, Assemblymember.
Thank you, David, for having me.
So what is it about existing state laws that leave a so-called protection gap for some New Yorkers?
Yeah, so this is about stalking, and we know nowadays stalking happens in many forms. And right now, if you're a victim of stalking, but the perpetrator is not a family member or someone who has been intimate with you, there is no recourse to get an order of protection. If they're a family member, if they're intimate, you can go to the family court and get a immediate temporary order of protection, and then there's a hearing. But if they're not, and in many cases they're not, right? It could happen online. It can happen through an acquaintance, through a neighbor, a former friend. There's many ways that this can happen today, and there's no recourse except going to the police, filing a police report, getting an investigation, pursuing the investigation, finding that perpetrator, and bringing them to court. So there's a lot of steps that happen, and oftentimes people don't want to pursue that. They just want them to stop. So my bill, called CREEP, it stands for Ceasing Repeated and Extremely Egregious Predatory Behavior Act, with Senator González, allows us to have a civil order of protection without having to go through the criminal route.
So you mentioned the idea of an order of protection. What exactly does that entail, and what sort of either peace of mind or actually substantive protections does that provide someone?
It would halt any sort of interaction, so ensuring that they no longer stalk you, monitor you, harass you, threaten you. So they will be prohibited from being around you in your presence and pursuing any of the actions that they have pursued to create the kind of danger that the victim feels. So it's a really strong order, and oftentimes the behavior stops. It's been proven that oftentimes just having a civil order stops the behavior, and then that person doesn't have to go to the criminal route, because many people don't want to pursue criminal charges. They just want them to be left alone. So this gives them recourse if they're not a family member or an intimate partner.
So it sounds like the practical effect of a order of protection is essentially putting someone on notice to say, don't do this, or else there's probably something worse for you around the bend, right?
Yeah, because if they violate that order of protection, then they get arrested. So it levels up the situation. But again, if they follow the order of protection and the behavior stops, then often the person can now live their normal life and stop living in fear.
Well, what is the scope of something like this? I mean, is there a reason to believe this is something that, if enacted into law, is going to be widely utilized, and that there are many New Yorkers who would take advantage of something like this? Or do you view this as more of a niche problem?
I think this is a really great question, because there are protections for the person who's been accused of stalking. So right now they can get an immediate temporary order of protection, but there will be a hearing, and it's written in the bill, that allows for them to go forward. And in civil court, it's a preponderance of evidence. They have to be shown that, there's more evidence than not that this person has, stalked them. So there is a hearing option. If it's a frivolous order of protection or accusation, then the court of law will see that through and will dismiss it. So we don't imagine it'll be a frivolous thing, right? People, again, want to feel safe and feel protected, but it does allow for recourse for those who have been accused to have a fair hearing before there's a permanent order of protection placed.
Well, do you view this as something where the person who's accused of stalking is going to have, say, the resources to adequately defend themselves? Because I could imagine there's a world where this is New York. We've got New York City. There are probably celebrities who feel like they're being stalked by people. Maybe it's in their professional capacity. Maybe they work for a tabloid, or maybe they're an independent photographer. And if I'm, facing one of these order of protections, and I have to sort of demonstrate that I'm not actually stalking, is that going to be a heavy burden for me? Am I going to have to go get a lawyer to potentially defend whatever activities I'm doing?
Yeah, we have a part of the bill that talks about like attorney fees and whether they would be responsible for attorney fees. It's only if the final order of protection shows that there's attorney fees necessary that would happen. So they might have to not to go through a large legal process and spend a lot of money at that point. But we want to make sure that this is an avenue, again, that allows for an immediate temporary order and then again a hearing for both the respondent and the victim to come together to determine whether that immediate order is determined to be a final order so that the victim feels protected.
So both the Legal Aid Society and a group representing defense attorneys have registered to lobby on this issue, and historically they have been out front in terms of trying to protect the rights of defendants as opposed to, say, the victims in these cases. So what sort of feedback have you gotten from them?
Yeah, so some of the points in the opposition memo spoke to an earlier version of the bill that we've already resolved. And there are some points that we want to look forward, so there might be additional amendments. Again, I'm someone who really supports the public defenders and the work that they do. But again, this bill is to close that loophole for victims of stalking and allows for immediate recourse for them to feel safe. And we want people to feel safe, and I think we all agree. So, there might be further discussions to fine-tune some of the elements of the bill to make sure that that fair hearing is fully fair. There's something called a Crawford Amendment that we might include that refers to another case that they had fought for, but we are looking at maybe specific tweaks to the bill to accommodate for any of their concerns. But we think we can get to a good place, and we believe that we all want to keep New Yorkers safe, and this is an avenue where someone doesn't have to go to the police and pursue criminal charges if they just want their perpetrator to stop.
So ultimately, if this legislation is enacted, who would be the final say on whether a person and their concerns about safety were valid? Is it a judge?
It's a judge.
Oh, and then they would say...
In civil court.
Okay, and so they would say, we're hearing your complaint, and based on the preponderance of evidence that's been advanced, a rational or reasonable person would say, this person has not felt safe, and therefore don't do it anymore, or else there's going to be a real problem.
Exactly. So it goes through the civil court system rather than the criminal court system. So we're not looking to put someone in jail unless they violate that order of protection, if that order of protection is finalized. So again, it really gets us away from the criminal charges and criminal path. And again, most people just want to feel safe, and the civil option is a really important thing. The other thing I want to say is that 43 other states have this protection. We are sadly a leader of those with the worst protection, and we are in company of states like Alabama, Arkansas, Delaware, Iowa, Mississippi, Oklahoma. You think New York would be a leader in this area, and sadly we are falling far behind in protecting victims of stalking.
In some stalking cases, this could be a brief issue with a person, and the order of protection will, ultimately change that behavior. For others, though, the stalking behaviors could be a product of, say, mental illness. So is there a case to be made about, in addition to pursuing this order of protection, also maybe looking to address the underlying conditions that might have prompted the stalking and try to connect people to services?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I feel really strongly about, and that's why I think going the criminal route could endanger the person that might need help, and going through a civil avenue would stop the behavior, but hopefully we can find that person services that they need, because we want to make sure people are healthy and not thrown into the criminal justice system that often exacerbates mental illness and makes things worse and doesn't solve the problem. So again, we really believe this is a fair and equitable route that gets us away from the criminal system that could, again, exacerbate a situation where someone is struggling with mental illness and prevents them from getting the care that they need.
And because this is a bill that is designed to update state law, are you also making sure that people are aware of the latest forms that stalking can take? Because I imagine when these laws were written, it was primarily about someone calling and hanging up or showing up in a physical way, but now obviously there's so much more opportunities with the internet.
Yeah, the 21st century ways of stalking, right? Cyber stalking. The bill recognizes that technology has made it easy, cheap, and convenient for offenders to amplify their harassment. They could spread sensitive personal information. Deep fakes is an issue, obviously. They can track their location. I just saw on Instagram people could track your location if you allow them to do that. You can be contacted in a multitude of social media platforms. So this bill acknowledges the 21st century way of stalking that we have to continue to keep up with.
Well, we've been speaking with Assemblymember Jessica González-Rojas. She's a Queens Democrat. Assemblymember, thanks so much for making the time.
Thank you for having me.
Support for the Capitol Press Room is provided by New York State United Teachers, a statewide union of nearly 700,000 professionals in education and healthcare.